30th agenda session. If I can get a motion on our minutes, please. Motions have been, motion to be approved. Second, without objection, the minutes will stand. Ordinances on final reading this evening. We have 3 planning items, and I believe all of those, 2 of those are in District 8, and we have a text amendment. Any issues, Councilwoman Knoll? We're ready for final read. Thank you. Under Parks and Public Works, without objection from council tonight, I will read items D through I. These are all abandonments, and I will look for lights if there are any questions on those items. Then moving into ordinances on first reading, we have the Downtown Central Business Improvement District presentation this afternoon, but this item covers a change to the ordinance that we have discussed a couple of times now. And I believe we have a special presentation this afternoon by the Cvid. And I also want to recognize Reverend, I had it written down, I'm sorry, Kathy Meyer, I apologize, from Second Pres, who is here, and you will say a few words before that presentation this afternoon. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Under resolutions this evening, Human Resources, we have an item that was asked to be added. Do you want to cover that for me real quick, Joda? And if council has any questions, this is under Human Resources, item A, please.
Yes, there are a couple of these items that were added with permission. I'm happy to cover each of them as they come up, but this item is under Human Resources, and this is a resolution that this council has already passed, but we recognize there was some erroneous language in the original resolution, and then out of an abundance of caution, brought it back to this body. The 2 changes were clarifying this is a 3-year blanket contract with 2 possible renewals of 1 year each, and then the previous language also said an estimated $2 million. We have revised that language to say not to exceed $2 million.
So you put a ceiling on that?
That's right.
Okay. Thanks, Joda. And I do not see any lights, so I think your explanation has been satisfactory. Under the mayor's office, we have several appointments. If you would take a look at these appointments, we have covered these in previous sessions, and hit your light if you have any questions or concerns on any of the appointments for this evening. And again, without objection, I will ask council to indulge me and read these as a package. Joda, do you want to take item R, or do you want Brent for the other added item?
Brent may want to come and follow up on this one, but the mayor's office is submitting a resolution to this council to approve a $750 per person transition supplement to the 48 employees in the city who are still receiving weekly paychecks. This causes an undue burden on our payroll staff, as we have to do basically the same amount of work for running payroll for those 48 employees as we do for all, the other 2,600 employees. And this is a effect not only on efficiency, but also customer service. If we think of our own internal employees as customers, because inadvertently every payroll that we run does come with some issues. And in an ideal situation, in the off weeks when we are not running payroll, we would like to be solving problems to help address those issues faster. And so after, I think, some foot dragging, frankly, out of previous administrations to actually get this done and move everyone into a biweekly payroll, we're going to go ahead and get this done. And we acknowledge that this is a bit of a inconvenience for some employees. And although Brent, and he can detail this further, has offered kind of several options to make sure no employee is financially impacted by this, by allowing every single employee to advance PTO to cover the gap period of time where the transition would result in a lack of a paycheck, because if they're normally getting paid every week and then they suddenly switch to biweekly, we will allow them to advance PTO and get paid for the essentially double for those weeks that they are not going to get paid. So they would switch over to the biweekly process. And if they do not have enough PTO, we will advance PTO to them and allow them to pay that back. But recognizing that as an inconvenience, we are also asking council to approve a $750 per person supplement to their paycheck to cover that inconvenience.
My question would be, and I don't see any lights, Joda, so I'll ask this, or I see one now. Are all parties amenable to this solution as best as possible?
I'm sorry.
Are all parties amenable?
Well, I think there is. So, I mean, this is one of those sacred cows, to be honest, that has been a long-standing thing with a limited group of 48 employees who felt very strongly about their weekly pay. I think that if it were up to them, we'd continue doing weekly pay regardless of the impact of the city in perpetuity. But we do feel like in our conversations with employee groups, particularly the SEIU, that this is a amenable resolution that would help bridge that inconvenience gap, or at least to make the pill go down a little bit easier.
Councilman Henderson and then Councilwoman Hill.
So, Chief, I thought I understood from your last statement that this is kind of what we landed on was just a supplement. It's a bonus. Maybe
It's another way of thinking about it.
of $750 that in no way, and when I say paid back, there's no, it's not tied to PTO at this point.
No, this is administratively a little easier, although I will say $750 ends up being right around the ballpark of any PTO that folks would have to advance in terms of value.
So, I mean, kind of in essence, we're paying them $750 to switch over to the.
That's right. We're essentially, this is a supplement given that they will receive a temporary interruption in their pay cycle, but they have several options in order to actually receive essentially double the paycheck on the second that this goes into effect, so that they would be held harmless. But this $750 would essentially accommodate the inconvenience that some of these employees would have to be undergoing.
They're in essence getting an extra paycheck in the year.
And again, these 48 employees have a range of pay grades, range of positions all over the city. They're largely legacy roles, although there are some specific individuals that maybe have been promoted. Our EIG says that if you get promoted, you move over to a biweekly pay schedule anyways. And some folks maybe got missed in that process in previous years. But this would cover, again, the inconvenience of transitioning over.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, sir. Councilwoman Hill?
Thank you, Chair. First, could we turn the lights up? The older I get, the harder it is for me to make sense of bright light to stare into it. Is that as bright as we go? Yeah, better. Okay, I'll change sheets with him next time, if that's okay. Okay, so this $750 bonus, effectively, to handle the inconvenience as a response, as a customer service response, I think is very generous. Nobody's really going to lose any pay. We're just talking about inconvenience. But Chairman, when I then think about item 7G of our agenda next week, I feel like these are employees that are materially being hurt. And so I want to connect those two. I recognize we're not on next week's agenda yet, but if I can put a pin in that, and just if you'll help me bring attention to this next time when we get to that agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Councilman Hester, I see your light, sir.
I just want to applaud the human resource area for acting on this, because I know I've been getting a lot of calls regarding this. A lot of calls. Some of the people say they're being convenienced for a whole month had y'all not put something in play. So thank you for getting involved in this. Thank you.
Yeah, our HR team, our finance team, and the mayor's office are pretty committed to making sure that folks don't feel like they were, bilked or are frustrated with the process. We understand that there's some inconveniences that come with the transition, but we think this is in the best interest of the city. So thank you, Councilman.
Good, Councilman. Any other questions or comments on this particular item? Then we move into Parks and Public Works. If you'll take a look at the items under Parks and Public Works, we have covered those items in committee. And we'll move on to purchasing. We have 2 purchases this evening. We have 3 RFPs. Joe, do you want to give us a rundown on the RFPs? And I'm seeing no lights for our purchases, but they may trickle in here in just a second. And
Yes,
0
Mr.
emergency
Chairman.
purchases this evening.
Happy to cover the 3 RFPs that we have listed for this evening. Just for clarification, these do not actually allow us to move forward with a contract. This is simply the permission to issue an RFP. The first one is a Parks and Outdoors RFP to take an RFP out for concessionaire services for recreation facilities at various city-owned facilities, including the Summit of Ballfield Complex, Warner Park Fields, Warner Park Aquatic Center, and Frost Stadium Complex. Just given that there are a range of solutions, and we're putting this out for proposal. The other 2 items under the mayor's office are, one is focused on Airport Inn, which is focused on the property at 7725 Lee Highway that's currently owned by the city of Chattanooga, and we have stated that we seed for this to be converted into permanent supportive housing or affordable housing, and we are seeking proposals from developers to achieve that objective, including a proposal on how those supportive services will be provided, what amenities, community benefits, and property improvements will be included in that process as well. And once this council approves, if this council approves the ability to issue this RFP, we'll go and work with members of council, particularly Councilwoman Burrs, given that this is her district, but also some community members to identify what are some of the factors that the community wants to see in these proposals to make sure they're reflected. The second item is the community violence interruption technical assistance item. The city seeks a technical assistance provider to help us set up a community violence interruption initiative. We're working with a number of organizations who have interest in this, and we are interested in seeing if we can get some support from organizations that have done this nationally.
Madam Vice Chair, I see your light.
Yes, I had a question about the purchases, the Chattanooga Fire Department. I'm always excited to see investments into our fire department. So could we get more information on this much needed and overdue purchase for our wonderful fire?
I will turn it over to our esteemed fire chief.
Okay, thank you.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, let's not get too carried away here. No, all kidding aside, this is a big purchase for us. This is probably this is the largest purchase of fire apparatus that we've done in my history here. And this, we're actually purchasing 6 trucks. It'd be 4 pumpers, 1 quint, and 1 ladder. And it will be replacing some of our trucks that have 21 years of service on the road. To put that into perspective, I have 27 years of service here, close to retirement. So some of these trucks are, they get beat up. With our call volume that we run, it's high time that they get replaced. So this is just a big step for us. We're happy to get these. We talked to the company that we're ordering from Nebraska. Turnaround time is about 18 months. So a large order like this takes a little bit of precedence in the factory. If we were ordering 1 truck or 2 trucks like we have in the past, it can go up to 2 years before we actually see them.
Wow.
So, big purchase.
This is good. So you said 6 trucks?
6 trucks.
6.
Mhm.
1 quint and 1 ladder.
4 pumpers, 1 quint, 1 ladder.
All right, then. Well,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you so much. I'm excited, and I'm glad that we're able to make those investments for you.
We're excited as well.
It's
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Hey, Chief, before you go, I don't see any other lights. We're still averaging 53 calls a day. Is that correct?
Mhm.
And I'm glad to see that number is, I mean, it's big, but I'm glad to see it hasn't gone up. It seems to be hovering around there for several years.
Yep.
But yesterday I watched, as I was coming in, 3 or 4 apparatuses going to the accident scenes around the East Brainerd area, and then 153. And it made me think about how often these vehicles are used every single day in responding to life-saving emergencies.
Yep.
And this is a truly great investment. And you know our commitment to supporting our firefighters. And I'm also very proud and echo Madam Vice Chair's comments and being able to support our firefighters.
It's greatly appreciated.
Yep. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Seeing no other questions, I have no other questions, Joda, on the RFPs, no lights. We'll move into our September 6th agenda. And Councilwoman Hill, you had an item you wanted to discuss. I believe it was 7G I have written down.
Correct.
But before that, may I go back to planning item A on the 6th? Councilman Smith, have you gotten word that that could be a request for withdrawal?
No.
Okay. I would put the bee in your bonnet, so to speak, and I did hear a rumor of that.
Okay.
Okay.
have not been notified.
Okay. I think
Thank
that you would be the first one to know, but somehow I got that information, so I wanted to pass that along to you, sir. And Councilwoman Hill, hit your light one more time, please. There you go.
If we could, it'd be great if Joda could, or Brent could talk us through this item first. So I make sure that I fully understand and potentially my concerns will be handled.
Sure. So during the 2021 pay plan implementation process and the subsequent 2022 classification appeals process, we, through an error in calculation based on years of service that were loaded wrong in the system, we overpaid some employees, some significantly, like over $10,000. And we know of about 5 so far. There could be a couple others as we are going through the process of auditing all of the information that we have in the employee information system to make sure that we have everything correct, including things like seniority dates that drive certain things. So we have determined that there are at least 5 employees that were overpaid. So these employees owe the city the amount of money that we overpaid them. And as an option for employees, we are asking the council to allow employees to sell their PTO at 100% versus 70%, which is the policy included in the employee information guide. I mean, there may be some employees that just want to pay back the funds if they haven't spent the money. And there may be employees who would like to sell some PTO at 100% of their current daily rate in order to repay the city. But we wanted to provide this as an additional option for employees to be able to repay the funds.
Thank you, Brent. So one of my constituents is one of the people that's affected by this, not to the tune of $10,000, but nonetheless, this is a situation that is obviously very unfortunate. But at least when it comes to my constituent, we aren't talking about people who are making $80,000 a year and they got overpaid $5,000. We're talking about people who are being paid $39,000 and they got paid $3,000 more or $5,000 more because they were told by our city that that's how much they were going to get a raise for. They themselves did not do anything wrong. Also, as part of this snafu, we have people who are making more money with less seniority. I have a gentleman in my district who, by virtue of being promoted, his pay went down below the value of someone who came in later to do a lesser job. So it's just a cluster of mistakes. So I, brought up and this offer of 100% buyback of PTO is interesting. But what I've come to understand in conversations with SEIU and employees is that banked PTO time is something that people actually take into account as part of their overall retirement strategy. And we've got people who have been banking hours of PTO time who now are going to be setting themselves back 3-4 years of banked PTO. So this is a very real damage that the city, I believe, has done to these folks. And what I understand is that we can't, quote, forgive taxpayer money, right? Like they've been given more taxpayer money than within our staffing model they should have been, not through any fault of their own. So the city can't forgive that money because by law, we have to be good stewards of taxpayer money. And that all makes sense. And everybody was trying to do their best job when this all went down and third-party vendor involved, et cetera. But Joda, I was just intrigued by the recommendation for these folks who are paid weekly, who effectively are not going to be injured, potentially inconvenienced. And no doubt when you're paid by the week, I get it, like the way that the bills get paid. So it could cause stress. But we're offering these 48 individuals $750 just to be more comfortable. And we have 5 individuals who, I mean, it's the difference between the new lease you got, right? Like I got a new apartment and now I can't afford it because they're not only lowering my pay in a way that is insulting because I'm skilled and now I am poorly paid. You're insulting my 12 or so years of experience at the city by giving me a raise only to have other people be paid more than me, and now you want my money back. Y'all can understand how that's just a problem. And I personally would like some other options on how we help these folks handle this situation. You know, you all have said there's going to be a revision to the pay plan. Like if that means that whoever the person that has received $10,000 extra could take that as a rebate on their, so I'm going to make 20,000 this year, but last year I made 21, like I can just take 20 for another year to pay it back, like some kind of other options besides cashing out my retirement in the form of PTO to make up for a mistake that somebody else made.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I don't disagree with anything you've said. I do want to just state for the record that the employees who were overpaid were provided with a letter that listed the incorrect seniority date, and we did not have anyone tell us it was wrong. I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying that the incorrect seniority date was provided to them before we made changes. That's not an excuse. It's just, I just want to make sure that that was known. So some employees we've talked about doing a repayment plan, withhold a certain amount over a long period of time. The reason we're requesting the PTO payout is because it was requested that if that was an option. There was an employee that asked if that was a possibility in order to pay it out. We don't have any authority, any executive authority to gift public funds. So if the city council wants to do something different, we will certainly make sure that we implement whatever the council pleases.
Since it's 5 individuals, Brent, would you be able to send us the exact numbers for each of these people? Like what the PTO is, what the salary is, what they were told their salary was, and what needs to be paid back so that we can understand kind of what does this look like 2 years from now if they decide to continue working with the city after having this experience? So that we could see, because if a true up is coming, and I know you all have been working diligently to fix these problems with the pay plan, what's that going to look like when that's fixed so that we can have the full picture of how to treat these employees with justice and mercy, I guess.
Yes, I will get that information from Human Resources so that we can provide it.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thank you so much for looking into that. Dr. Burrs?
What is the phrase, "you can't forgive taxpayer dollars," even mean? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, well, we can't gift public money to anyone without, and I would ask the attorney to chime in, but the council would have to approve any sort of gifting of public money.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's the thing, it's executive can't without, it's a policy thing. Okay. So we would have to make the difference.
Yeah, in terms of
Yeah,
gifting
I just
public money,
didn't
yes.
have any idea what that even meant. Like, what does that phrase even mean? Okay, you can't forgive taxpayer dollars. Okay.
That's probably my phrasing of what I've learned, so please don't.
Oh,
So
oh,
these people, they were paid incorrectly, they were paid more.
yeah, I got that.
The answer is we have to have the money back. We can't give them that money. We can't forgive our mistake.
What that means is the executive branch can't do that. I picked up from your second statement. But the council can.
Well, I would defer to the attorney whether of what the
I-
council
I'm
can and
just-
can't do.
I
I'm
just wanna
going
know
there
what it
next, Brent.
means.
Just- Yeah, let me let Phil chime in
go
here. Phil,
ahead.
go ahead.
Sure, there is, at least the Tennessee Constitution is a little bit of a problem insofar as actually providing money to people for no purpose. It is the taxpayers' dollars, and that taxpayers' dollars are to be provided to individuals for pay that is earned, not for unearned pay. And that's the dispute that I think you have going on in connection with this. It's very similar to current litigation that we have going on where there was a mispayment for someone having $44,000 instead of $400 on a mileage reimbursement. That
Okay.
type of issue is the thing that we have to resolve, and we have to get that money back. So that's the issue they're dealing with. If the council wants to do something different in connection with this process, they can do so. The administrative branch is trying to bring that to you for some authority in what they're trying to do.
Okay, so that means we can't give, administration can't give bonuses unless the council says you can give bonuses.
Yes, ma'am, because that's the budget power of this body.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, I got it. I just didn't understand the phrase, we can't, because we do all the time, and I just went, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Burrs. I've got a bunch of lights coming in, and Councilman Henderson, I see yours, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberg, I guess two questions. One, this item G is just providing an option, correct?
Correct.
No one has to choose to sell their PTO.
No,
It's just providing an option.
They-
I mean, I just want to make sure that,
they just have to repay the city some way.
right, okay,
This is an option to let them use their PTO to do so.
okay. What are it says, subject to certain conditions.
They're attached in the attachment to the resolution, but the conditions include, I don't have it in front of me, but includes, the employee had to have been overpaid. They have to owe the city money. We can buy back up to 50 days, which is different from what's in the EIG. We can do it 100% versus 70%, which is in the EIG, because we don't want to penalize people that are using their PTO to pay back. And there's a couple other things, but it's listed in the attachment to the resolution.
Okay, I haven't.
We
looked
just
at
wanted to
the
make sure it
attachment.
wasn't open to everybody and their brother. We wanted to specify conditions.
Who it's open to.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, and I appreciate you bringing that point. This is an option. This isn't the final solution for all five. So I think that was an important point you made there, Councilman Henderson. Councilwoman Hill, if you don't mind, can I put a pin in that because to go around, Councilwoman Knowles has not had a chance yet. Councilwoman Knowles, and then I'll come back to you if you light again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Brent, so are they being required to pay it all back in one lump sum, or can it be set up in payments?
We can, and we've done that historically. We can certainly set up repayment plans where we withhold a portion over, 10 paychecks or whatever that might be. We routinely work with employees to set up plans for errors that occur, whether it's through benefits, elections, or whatever it is.
So is it a cap for 10 payments, or can it go longer than that?
Sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Is it a cap for 10 payments? Is it-
Not necessarily. It depends. You try to work with each employee individually to see what works.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good,
Thank you, Mr.
Councilwoman.
Chair.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Hill.
When Mr. Noblett brought up the fact that in Tennessee, there's a distinction between pay that is earned versus pay that is unearned. And it just, to me, these two items on today's agenda and next week's, where we've got one where we're effectively handing out 750 unearned dollars versus people who have been there through some really low salaries that we all agreed we were changing the budget to impact that, right? To help ensure that our city services were better staffed, were run well. This is a tough position to find ourselves in, to have these two things back to back 2 weeks, and not a simple answer here. And I definitely am looking for a way through with compassion, because to Councilman Henderson's point, like, we're not saying everybody's going to necessarily choose to do this PTO buyback, but goodness, if you're making 39 and now you're supposed to set up a payment plan where not only $100 a month for however long, I mean, that hurts. And it's very counter to the concept of customer service and we value you. So thanks. That's all.
Councilwoman,
Thank you,
I did want to just say really quickly I'm saying this instead of Brent because I wanted to be clear this is coming from the mayor's office. And Brent has a fiduciary duty to the city. I think there's some hat things here. I think I'm totally hear where you're coming from, Councilwoman, and for us in this administration, I think the reason that we provided the supplement is similar to the thought process you have around the paying folks paying their overpayment back. And I would say this administration would see a level of justice and rationale in, depending on if the amount was reasonable to council, to allow those those individuals, 5 individuals, not to repay. I think that is a decision that together this body can decide. And so what we will do is provide that number to council, so that way you can assess that similarly as you do during any routine settlement. Just so you can make that judgment call.
Thanks, Joe. Dr. Burrs, see your light. And then Councilman Henderson, you're next.
Okay. So I don't know that not repaying in some way is probably the best way to go. So what you're just saying here is this is one option. And I would feel really comfortable if you've listed some great options. You've talked about payment plans, or you've talked about this, and I believe this came from the parties, right, that are involved. They asked if that was an option.
Yeah, I believe one of the employees asked if they could use PTO to pay back.
So is there any reason why there's 5 employees? Is there any reason why each one of them can't figure out with you all a way they can pay it back? It doesn't have to be one size fits all. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we will work with each one individually. This is
Okay.
just merely, we're only coming, we would normally just work with employees internally to figure these things out, because
Well, that was
this
my
doesn't
next
happen.
question. Why
It's-
was it coming to us?
And it's not routine that this happens, but for example, there may be a change in benefits or something that impacts, what was withheld or not withheld. And so if there's a situation where an employee owes us for something, we usually try to work it out, but for what's best for that employee on an individual basis. We would do that with these 5, but because we got the request to allow them to use PTO, the policy currently states that they can only get 70% of the value.
Okay.
And the only way that we can override that 70% is for council to approve a resolution to provide an exception
Because
to
of the egg.
policy.
Got it. All right. I would really appreciate, and this is just my 2 cents, Mr. Chair, that if we approve this, that's the only thing that's in contravention of the egg, right?
Yes.
And if we approve this, then you work out quietly each individual case.
Yes, we will work with each one individually
All right.
to determine the best
Including
way.
whatever of impact it is on benefits.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Purrs. Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, and I'm just throwing this out to the council maybe to consider. Brent, what I think what I've heard is maybe all parties have a little bit at fault here. I mean, right, I mean, the employees, nobody contested the fact I was being paid too much. We might have known we was being paid too much. So I guess what I would throw out to the council in hearing the discussion that we've had here today is I wonder if in this particular situation, maybe the city forgives half, the council forgives half, and then they pay back half, so that we've all got a little bit of stake in correcting this error. I don't know what the administration feels about that. That's just something I'm throwing out. The other thing is I would be interested to know, and something was mentioned, Councilwoman Noel mentioned 10 payments, and I don't know or 10 paychecks. I wondered if that time could be extended maybe through the budget year. I don't know what options are available, but obviously something would be a lot easier paid back if it was at least through the end of the budget year for them to pay back.
Yeah, we typically try to set a period that works for the employee.
Okay, so we're not going to just limit it to 10, and maybe that's just what you threw out there. I don't know.
Yeah, because I had mentioned
Okay.
I had mentioned 10 earlier. As
Okay.
an example. But yeah,
Okay.
it could go
Okay.
longer.
So it's wouldn't necessarily be limited to 10. It could be extended to the, I guess, end of the fiscal year. The other thing is, I understand the situation of going from being paid every week to every 2 weeks. But I don't understand us giving a bonus of $750 to individuals to do that. I mean, I could go with the full buyback PTO policy of 100%. Why can't we apply that policy to that situation? Let them earn whatever money that they needed 100% in order to help them through that week. But I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around giving an employee a $750 bonus to put them on the every other week plan.
So and Joda can speak to the transition supplement, but the options employees have, just to be clear about the why. Weekly employees currently work 1 week and then they get paid a week later. It's 1 week in arrears.
Hey, Brent,
Bi-weekly.
real quick, I'm sorry. Just for those of you who are following along, we are no longer talking about item G on September 6th. We are now back to item R
Well, they both
for tonight. I just want to make sure, because we're jumping around a little bit. I want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
they both got to go together,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
People on biweekly pay work 2 weeks and they get paid 2 weeks after that. So it's 2 weeks in arrears. So when a new employee starts at the city, they don't get paid for a month because they have to work 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, they get paid for those 2 weeks. So it's a 2 weeks in arrears for biweekly pay. So to go from that 1 week in arrears on weekly pay to 2 weeks in arrears on biweekly pay, there's a big gap in timing. So if the employee chooses to do they just get paid for their time worked during the conversion, they would just skip a full paycheck on the 15th of September and then also on the 29th of September. And then they would, on October 6th, they're on the cycle. But that means they're skipping 2 weeks worth of pay.
Why can't they gain the week that they skipped at the very beginning?
Well, we have an option for them to do that. So
Then let's do that.
The employees
And give them
currently-
100% of their PTO.
We are allowing employees, if they don't want to take the delay, they can choose to advance PTO. It's not a buyback. We're calling it an advance of PTO, which is what we've done historically when we move the rest of the employees to biweekly. There was one small group of employees excluded from the conversion based on the wishes of the administration that was in place at the time. But we advance PTO so that week of like the 15th, for example, they would just go ahead and get 2 weeks worth of pay on the 8th to cover the 8th and the 15th. And then on the 22nd, they would also get 2 weeks worth of pay. And that would be from advanced PTO, 40 hours each paycheck or 80 hours total. That's an option as well. And they can choose whichever one they want. The transition supplement that Joda spoke about is on top of those options.
I want to touch on the rationale for why. I'm not usually in the position of running through what the argument would be for the SEIU or the employee affected, but I think the rationale, and I think it makes sense, right? Which is that this is this conversion to a 2-week pay cycle will require the employee to burn through 80 hours of PTO in order, and they can advance it, right? But they would effectively choose to lose 80 hours of PTO in order to be on the cycle and still get paid for each of the 2 weeks. When Brent talks about, advancing PTO, that doesn't come out of nowhere. Those are 40 hours for each week that they would be getting paid. So essentially, the city acknowledges that that is a inconvenience and that we are providing $750 in order to supplement for that inconvenience. And I think that it is thereabouts, I don't know exactly, but it would be different for every employee, but thereabouts that 80 hours, it would be a pretty rough number that would ballpark that PTO value.
Okay. So when an employee stops working, they're still due 1 week of paycheck, right?
Yes.
Why can't we advance that week? And then they're only having to use 40 hours of PTO. Is that not correct?
We got that question a lot.
I think it's the second time I've asked it today.
So they are.
So I get it.
An employee is 1 week in arrears.
Okay, let's pay their arrear that week.
So we are in the conversion.
So that's only 40 hours of PTO.
Right.
advance,
But there is a new employee that comes in. Think about a new employee that comes in. They go a whole 160 hours before they get a paycheck, right? They work 2 weeks.
Right.
Then they work 2 more and they get paid at the end of that 4th week for the first 2 weeks. So it's a much bigger gap. So that 40 hours that you're talking about, they're going to get paid out for that, that 1 week in arrears, plus another 80 hours to make up to get onto the same cycle. Because they have to reset. Their check on the 8th of September is technically their in the hole check, or that check that's in arrears that they get. And then they're resetting on the new cycle where they have to be 2 weeks behind. I have a document.
Okay, why do they have
I have
to
a
be 2
visual.
weeks? Why do they have to be 2 weeks behind?
To get on the same cycle as everybody else, to the other 2,500 plus employees.
I think I'm gonna have to.
I can share a visual with the council that shows the walkthrough.
So Brent, I'm hearing some chatter. So my question is, this obviously was asked for a speedy addition because it was a solution. But if it were deferred 1 week, what does that do to the situation?
Well, I would say the supplement's a separate issue. Administratively, we are changing the from weekly to biweekly, and we've offered them options to.
So the
delay
city's
pay.
doing this regardless.
Yes, we believe
Okay.
so, unless you all pass something that says we're not allowed to.
Okay.
But the way that they have an option now to either just delay and get onto the same cycle or advance PTO. The supplement, I would say, is a separate issue that could be delayed. We can't delay the implementation though, unless we delay it just bring it back up in like January. The reason is because the September 8th effective date, which means the first check they would miss if they don't take an advance, would be the 15th. The reason we're starting on the 8th is because if they do advance PTO, we want the payback, especially for employees that don't have PTO to use. If we advance them and then they have to repay us over 10 paychecks through the end of the calendar year when PTO resets. We're trying to make it to where they can get everything reset at the beginning of the calendar year and not be in the hole in January when they restart their accrual.
So my question is rooted in the urgency, and if I'm incorrect, please let me know. If this is not what happens this evening, we could be creating some financial hardship for.
I think it would certainly create uncertainty, and that would affect exactly which option the employee chooses. For example, whether or not to advance 40 hours of PTO, advance 80 hours of PTO, and they've got to decide by tomorrow because the finance team's really got to go and make sure all of this is correct. If you choose not to move forward or defer the supplement, I think it will create some level of confusion amongst the employee base.
Yeah, and when you say that, does that translate into financial hardships?
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Henderson, anything else? Okay. Well, I understand your point, sir. Okay. Seeing no other lights on this item, if we'll move on into item H under Human Resources. We have the mayor's office. This is item I. If you'll take a look at that, we mentioned this last week in committee. So what I would ask you to do, each council member, if you would like to be a sponsor of this item, would you please email Nicole to add your name this week, and we will, each individual will have an opportunity to do so. Item I under mayor's office. The naming of the outdoor Chattanooga building. So we discussed this briefly, but reach out to Nicole if you would like to add your name to that resolution, please. Under planning, we covered that, I believe, in committee. Councilwoman Hill, item J. Yeah. I don't recall that in our planning and zoning meeting. Okay. Karen, do you have any? I see Karen. Dan. We'll take Joda then.
Eric, do you mind coming to talk about this? I think you probably know the most in the room about it.
So I'm happy to give a brief overview if you have any specific questions in advance.
Eric, why don't you give us 5 seconds on it?
Sure. The Safe Streets for All program is the USDOT. It's a new program this year, discretionary grant program. The Chattanooga, Hamilton County, North Georgia TPO is applying. This is to have the city of Chattanooga be a joint applicant in that. The purpose of the grant would be to put forward a planning proposal that would craft a comprehensive safety action plan for the region, which tees up further access to USDOT grants for implementation of any proposed solutions.
Okay. And I think that clarifies. So permission to apply for the grant.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on this item? All right, moving into Public Works, K, L, and M. Do you see anything, council, that grabs your attention? Councilwoman Hill, I see something in here about Lupton City Mill site cleanup. I thought that might. Yeah.
Okay.
Kay,
I am.
Go ahead and hit your light because I have a feeling you had something on that.
Yeah, I am. I mean, with Kay, I'm equally glad to see it moving and frustrated to see the change order because of all the drama we've had with this project. But most important is that the people of Lupton City are one step closer to having an environmental debacle outside their front doors solved. So, yay, team! Please
Yay.
vote yes. Thank you.
18. Thank you, Councilwoman. All right, items L and M, if you have any questions. If not, if you would, take a look at your future considerations and hit your light with any questions. And while we're looking at future considerations, let me go ahead and announce the city attorney did request a attorney-client meeting after this session in the conference room. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward with time. We do have 2 presentations this afternoon, so we're going to pick up pace here just a little bit. Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, sir. I guess maybe a question for Brent, the ordinance to amend our operations budget. And it says to various departments. Is it more than one department that we're
Yes, sir.
allocating money to? How soon could we get which departments and a breakdown of item C? Like,
We are planning to do a full budget presentation on the 13th day of September, and then it will appear on the agenda for vote on the 27th with a
So-
public hearing the week in between.
well, I mean, my question is, could we get some information before your presentation so that we could ask maybe more intelligent questions?
How soon before?
A week?
How about a week?
I could do at least a summary.
I'm not asking
just
for
saying,
your,
we
I'm
won't
not
have
asking
the-
for your full presentation. I'm just asking for departments and how each department is going to
Yes.
use
I do a
that money.
one-page summary.
It's just a, kind of line item.
One-page summary, yes.
That'd work for me.
Yeah, I just was hesitant because, we have to do ordinance changes and full-blown, just like a mini budget process, and we won't have all that done before the 13th, but I can do a one-page summary
Okay,
that covers 99.9% of it.
that would work. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. Any other comments on future considerations? Seeing no lights. Department, we have no department reports. We do have a committee, Public Safety Committee, and a presentation, but before that, I would like to welcome the Cvid. Are you ready for your presentation? And before Kelly comes to kick us off, well, I don't know. Councilman?
Are we then to the point that we're through with our agenda? And
We are.
so I do have one item that I need to bring
Okay.
before you and the council. I had a hand-delivered letter from Judge Bean that he would like to have read before the council and the council chambers. And I noticed we do have other business this afternoon at 6. Could we add that item to other business since we have?
Yes, sir. That would be totally acceptable. Madam Clerk, will you put in Councilman Henderson and other business at 6 o'clock, please?
Thank you.
And thank you, sir. And I believe also a note, Dr. Burrs, you had your light on. Let me grab that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like 2 items on the agenda, which I didn't get to before Councilman Henderson's request. I would like a budget committee meeting for 9/13,
Okay.
where we cover all of those issues that we've asked
That
about.
we've asked about.
Yeah,
Madam Clerk?
and it's been planned for a while, sir, so.
Okay.
And then the other one is, I would like time for the Hamilton County School Foundation to talk about its priority initiatives, particularly when it has to do with the arts for the kids. A lot of the arts programs have been taken out of the schools, music or insufficient funding. And I would like for them to make a presentation that I think might be something we're very interested in.
Did you have a date in mind?
I was going to ask you for a date in mind, and
Okay.
whether you wanted it strategic planning or whether you want it,
I believe this is Ms. Barclay, if I'm not correct.
yeah.
All right, I am correct. How about,
Well, do you want a strategic planning or do you want it at agenda session?
well, I was going to ask you if we could do a agenda session, but either one works.
Well, this
whichever-
is just, this is a quick one and I'd prefer agenda, excuse me, strategic
Strategic?
planning. Yes, sir.
How about the 6th?
Okay.
Is that too soon?
I don't think so.
You think she could be ready by then?
I'm sure she can.
Madam Clerk, can you add that to strategic planning, please? And Dr. Burrs will follow up with you on details.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you. Any other requests? Taking requests? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we will now move into our Cvid presentation. But before that, I believe we had someone who wanted to speak to us, and Reverend Myers. So thank you for sitting through our agenda session. And I think you were speaking on something regarding the Cvid. So I'll turn the mic over to you, ma'am.
Chairman Ledford and Vice Chairwoman Dotley and Councilman Smith. I just simply wanted to come to say thank you. Thank you for bringing this ordinance to us for 3 years now, I believe. The not-for-profits who have chosen to apply for a waiver to the bid assessment on our not-for-profit property. I'm speaking personally for our church. We have had to take quite a bit of time and energy to prepare that waiver. We did our homework. We looked at other cities who had similar types of assessments. We talked amongst ourselves about a practical understanding of what our church dollars were for, and primarily a theological understanding of what church dollars were given for. And when we first met about this to defend the waiver, it was pretty antagonistic. We were definitely felt strongly about our reasoning, and were hoping to convince those involved. And we did, and we appreciated being given that waiver each time. And I would say the last time that we met, it was actually a pretty congenial meeting, and I felt they were interested to hear what church dollars are being used for. And there was certainly an awareness as far as Second Presbyterian of the mission and ministry that we have going on there, and what we feel our dollars are committed for. And so not having to spend that time and energy each year to apply for that waiver, putting our resources to continued good use is just a yippee for us. And we just really appreciate the process of being heard. I feel being listened to and being heard. And so I just want to say thank you for bringing forward this ordinance that will allow us to do what we do each year without having to apply for the waiver. And I just wanted to come to say thank you personally.
Thank you, Reverend Meyer. Can I ask a quick question? How long have you been on that site? That was a question that was asked of me earlier, and I didn't know the exact date.
I'm sorry, ask that, how long have
How long have you been there in the church?
We celebrated 150 years last year.
150 years you've been serving our fair city there.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yes, sir. And, you know, we love being there, and we want to be partners with the city and with that downtown area. We value that location, and we value working with the city in what we do. But yes, sir, we've been there a long time, and by golly, we're going to be there another 150. So thank you.
Thank you very much for coming down. All right. I believe, Kelly, you're presenting this afternoon? All right. Do you have a slide presentation, or you do not? Okay.
I didn't know that was a requirement, Councilman.
It's okay, I promise you. We get a lot of slide presentations, so
Okay.
it is okay.
I'm going to keep this as brief as possible, but happy to answer questions. Councilman or Chairman Ledford, Vice Chair Dotley, and Councilman Smith, I echo Reverend Meyer's comments in that we really appreciate as a board, the ordinance as the way it was written has been a struggle for us as a board, just trying to adhere to the rules that we were given. So as we've talked about, I realize there's a few language tweaks, as I understand it, on the actual language of the ordinance. As soon and our board in our last meeting approved in concept that as a whole, once the language was determined by council, that we're in principle ready to move forward on that. So I just want you all to know that that's I think a constant item that has needed to be addressed every year when we present our budget to you all. So we are very thankful to be moving in that direction. I will say, as a whole, the other thing that we're working through that you guys, I believe, have been briefed on is that we are changing our fiscal year to adhere to your fiscal year, which I think makes a whole lot of sense. It gives a lot of us less headache and just makes things a lot more clear. So I don't know if there's anything else that necessarily needs to be said on that piece, but that does reflect, it is reflected in the packet that I believe you all have received. Is that correct?
Yes, we received it this afternoon, and
Perfect.
Mr. Goldberg has addressed council as well on the reason and in the alignment process. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Okay. So I think overall, if you have specific questions on the budget, I'm happy to address those items. We also have Gordon Stallings here, who's our treasurer, and he's happy to answer questions as well if I can't. But I would just say the biggest thing that we are working on right now is beyond the day-to-day operations is just having the opportunity the last couple months to step back, evaluate the work that's being done. We're not exactly drinking through a fire hose like we were in the formation. So we have gone through or have initiated a strategic planning process. There's a strategic planning committee within the board. Councilman or Chairman Ledford is part of that. And then we have 3 or 4, I can't remember, 3 or 4 other members of the board that are part of that. And that process has looked like interviewing constituents in the district. And it has ranged from small property owners to large property owners to tenants. We've really tried to step back and get a very clear picture of people who are paying into the assessment. You know, what are they looking for? What do they care about? And then, as you'll see in the surplus that we've got in the budget, that surplus will be used to address those concerns directly. We've also sent out a survey at large and seeing how that aligns back with the feedback that we're getting from our constituents. So I would just say that's a big part of it. You've probably also continued to see our ambassadors. I think one of the things that we're really proud of as an organization in the last year is that we have worked with Project Return over the last couple of months to hire employees through a reentry program. It's worked really well for us. We have 2 employees that one of which I think at least one of them we will hire full time, which is really exciting. And we plan to continue in that process with that organization. So that's kind of what I've got, but I'm happy to answer detailed questions beyond that.
Kelly, I'm not seeing any lights, but do you want to hit on some highlights of what was maybe accomplished? This might be something for Steve if you want to, of what has been improved over the last year from previous years. I mean, this is still a fairly new organization getting its feet underneath itself. But Steve, if you want to talk just a second about some of the priorities and also some of the improvements as you move forward, especially the relationship with Project Return. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm seeing more ambassadors on the street downtown and doing a myriad of different projects, and it's very interesting to see.
Yeah, I think, and I'll let Steve speak to this, but I do think that another thing, if you mentioned sort of highlights, is we had initially budgeted for a pretty large landscape plan for the district. And in going through the process with the RFP of the landscape architect, they kind of came back and said, hey, we really should just do this on a trial basis, see how it works with these particular plants, not to get in the weeds, no pun intended, but, let's start small. And so that we've kind of backed off on that to start small, see what works, and then be able to implement that district wide. We feel that's a better use of the funds. So there's several things like that. We've also been able to give a raise, a cost of living raise to our employees, which I think is key in the hiring process, but also just our employees' experience with us and their ability to grow from our organization to their next job too as well. So I don't know, Steve, take it away.
Well, every day we set out and we have what's called big and bright. And so we go out and we really just focus on getting the big pieces of trash up. And there's a lot of different things you come across when you're out there. So I don't want to get into the details of what we clean up every day. But we really focus on things that can ruin someone's day. So you can imagine what that might be in the morning time and throughout the day. We work on taking down graffiti on a regular basis. There's really some that goes up over the weekend and sometimes throughout the week, but really over the weekends when it goes up. So we try to get it down as quick as possible. We've added a bunch of landscaping. We worked with the city of Chattanooga to take the planters out of the bike lane and put them in that traffic island down on Aquarium Way, between Aquarium Way and 3rd Street on Broad Street, which I think we've received a lot of really good comments on, and people like that. Really, the thing we probably spend more time on than we thought we would at the beginning of the program is really working with people experiencing homelessness and trying to connect them with services. So there's a lot of organizations that work in that field here in Chattanooga. And so getting those relationships, building that trust and connecting them has been tremendous and really something we're improving on. I think everyone probably knows, and Sam, if he's still here, uses this analogy. We got with the homeless, we got we're like shoveling water out of a sinking boat, and it's hard to get all the water out before more comes in. And so it's challenging, but I know the city's doing a lot of work on the back end to really put some processes in place and some new things in place, such as the hotel we were talking about earlier today, to try to help in that manner. So yeah, the churches, we work with churches and in the YMCA to help a lot with it. But really, we're out there just every day doing what we can to help our businesses and our property owners and improve the overall conditions downtown. And so when people come down who live, work, and play, they're enjoying those conditions. We've had some really positive comments about the cleanliness of downtown, which we take a lot of pride in. And there's still, in my opinion, a lot of work to do.
Very good. Appreciate that. And you've reduced in your budget, Gordon, I believe the marketing was an item of conversation last year, but that's been reduced because
Yeah.
the website's now finished.
Correct. We didn't have a need last year. I think that was a point of conversation, and really it was rebuilding the website year to add more information. So we don't have near that need this year. So
Very good. Any questions from council for Cvid? I know this is something that we hear about every year, so a full presentation on what you do is probably not 100% necessary, but we appreciate you coming down and sharing with us the realignment to the city's fiscal budget, and we appreciate your support and the changes that are proposed as well. That really came from the support from the Executive Finance Committee and then the Executive Board and collaboration. Reverend Meyer, thanks for coming down. Any other questions or comments from council on Cvid? If not, I will turn us over to Public Safety Committee, Councilman Henderson. So that will conclude this. Thank you.
thank you.
And we do need an attorney-client just as a second reminder after this meeting.
Good afternoon and welcome to Public Safety. Could I get a motion on the minutes of the last meeting? All right. This afternoon, we are going to hear about the Violence Prevention Initiative. Most of you might think that Chief Murphy might present that, but we're actually going to ask Dr. Lambert if she would come and make a presentation.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon.
And the reason that Dr. I was going to put my military rank on Colonel, but it's Dr. Lambert. The reason that I'm presenting is because we do know that there is a public health approach to preventing violence, and in particular gun violence. And we certainly do work in partnership with CPD and other departments in decreasing the amount of violence in our city. There is, in fact, a roadmap to end gun violence that we worked on in collaboration internally with the individuals who are working have been working currently on violence prevention activities, intervention specialists, et cetera. We worked on that together internally. And then we had 2 meetings, community meetings. First was clergy, and then with an open community session for reviewing the roadmap and for providing their input as to where we were, what the gaps were, that kind of thing. I want to go over that with you briefly. I've only got about 8 slides. That public meeting on this roadmap was that was done in, and the public release was done in July, mid-July. So it's been out there, and we welcome continuing comments on this as we continue to work on this plan and on this living document. Again, I believe the release was in July. I don't know the date. Let's see. And all right. Oops. Okay, members of the council, can you see that presentation?
Yeah, it's on our screen.
Okay,
Mhm.
I don't see it on that screen,
Oh,
and that's what I
oh.
was wondering. Are we okay? Should we just go ahead?
We can't get it on the projector. You working? Oh, it's warming up.
Warming up. Okay. I'll start by just mentioning as the projector is now warming up. This framework is intended to be this is a living document. And it's a living document of our plan, our framework, not so much a plan, but our framework for how we're going to reduce the incidence of violence, and in particular gun violence in the city. It's a holistic and a collaborative. It's a holistic and collaborative approach. And it does balance accountability and justice with community engagement and investment. And that's an important factor in making a difference in reducing the violence in our city. It does have multiple layers of initiatives addressing multiple contributing factors. It does provide a community-wide foundation to build on, and it aligns with the One Chattanooga strategy. There are 2 operational pillars for this framework. They're intervention and prevention. With respect to intervention, these are the immediate steps to address gun violence on our streets. Focuses on small groups of people who are driving the majority of violence in our community. And it's driven by CPD, about our Chattanooga Police Department, as well as with the Office of Community Health. With respect to prevention, these are the long-term strategies to prevent the recurrence of those violent acts on our streets, including increasing opportunities for emotional support for our city's young people. We've certainly begun to do more of that, and to address the root causes of violence. Violence in our city and in many other cities in America is an epidemic, and there are public health approaches to preventing. The prevention should be driven by collective action from the city and from the community, and that's what we're working on, and that's why we wanted the input from the community when we released and discussed this framework. There are 7 guiding principles. And they include being trauma informed and aware, reaching families, not just the youth. So that includes parents, guardians, grandparents. Being city and community driven, coordinating and aligning and magnifying the ongoing work of others. So it's going to take all of us, the community, the city, our departments in the city, multiple departments in the city to impact this. It should center on, and we're focusing on those young people who are experiencing gun violence, because not only are they experiencing those gun violence events, but that trauma is also going to inform how they go forward and whether or not they repeat those violent acts unless we intervene. Another guiding principle is that this will be sustainable and it'll be scalable depending on what we're seeing, the level of violence that we're seeing. So we're guided by these principles, and we believe with those guiding principles, we'll be able to continue to develop this plan so that it truly addresses the need to prevent violence in our community. With respect to intervention, I want to go into that just a little bit further. This framework does or will include, and I've got a dead. Sorry. Not functioning. Could you, next slide, please? Okay, so intervention, and we do see this as CPD led and focused deterrence efforts with a deepened coordination with state and federal partners, new technology resources, law enforcement of juvenile curfew, expanded crisis response unit, and intensive violence interruption initiatives for those at the highest risk. And we know those areas in our community. Regarding prevention, next slide. This framework does or will include all of these elements, all of these bulleted elements. New teen empowerment and mentorship initiatives. We did have teen empowerment activities and extended hours at community centers through most of the summer. We're evaluating that and look forward to continuing that and measuring how effective those were. And we believe they did have some impact on reducing some of the violence. Capacity building resources for effective youth programming, wraparound services to support parents and families of at-risk youth. And again, that includes not just our traditional families, but foster families, grandparents, all kinds of families. We do see prevention as including the increased access to mental health services. And with that, we are utilizing many community partners who, among other things, will be providing mental health counseling services throughout the community in some of our community centers. And I must say that I applaud our private providers and some nonprofits who stepped up and came to us and wanted to know how they could help. So we're working on getting those into our community centers as well, where it fits. We do have to have a certain kind of resource facility to be able to provide confidential mental health counseling. Public health campaigns related to gun safety and storage. I was delighted to find on a tour of Erlanger Hospital that they had a gun safety and gun storage program in place. So we certainly will be partnering with them because we intended to have that kind of program in place as well. I've also seen that kind of program in place with the Veterans Administration. So we certainly can learn from how they have implemented that and how effective that they have seen that program of gun storage and gun safety for the veterans and their families. We also want to include career pathway and skill development programs for youth and adults. Part of what we're not seeing is the diversity of providers in the community who are knowledgeable, credentialed, and experienced in the areas of mental health and violence prevention. So we want to make sure that we provide those career pathways. And then ongoing efforts to increase affordable housing as another step in that prevention. Next slide. This is a starting point, this framework. We certainly do see this, and I can't say that enough, we see this as a living document, and as we continue to grow programs, add the staff that we're going to need, add the partners that we're going to need, this will continue to change and improve and will be what it needs to be to address whatever level of violence we see in our city. And we need to do that. And it needs to be a sustainable and, as I said before, a scalable framework for preventing violence in our city. Are there questions for me at this point?
I do have one line, and I've got a question as well.
Yes, sir.
Vice Chair Dotley.
Yes, thank you so much. Dr. Lambert, I just have a few questions. How long has the Office of Community Health been working on this particular roadmap?
We have been working on this roadmap for months. Okay. We certainly saw the need. We saw the need for it. We certainly have seen it for a long time. We've seen the need for it for a long time. The Office of Community Health has been in place for as long as Mayor Kelly has been in office. It was an initial. It's an initiative that's new for this administration, and it does include the community safety and gun violence prevention aspect of it. So we've been working on it for months. We did work on it internally with the folks who were currently working as intervention specialists. Some of that was prevention, some of that was more supporting victims of violence. And then once we had a framework that we thought was solid enough as a beginning, that's when we brought it to the community to get some input, because we believe firmly that the community needs to be a part of what we're seeing and what we put together to address. And then we need to have measures in place to identify how effective it's been and also to guide us in making necessary changes.
Okay, thank you. And because I did attend one of the meetings, the one with the pastors.
Oh, you did? I thought so. Okay.
Yes, and it went very well. My other question is about the expanded crisis response unit. This is something that we approved in the previous budget, and I know that it is currently active. So what is the current status of that response unit? I believe it falls, or the mobile crisis response unit, I believe it falls under your office.
The crisis, the CIT, Crisis Intervention Team, that does fall under CPD. And I have had, and again, we do work collaboratively, regular meetings and planning sessions with CPD. And I know there is staff in place, and it was part of that staff that's there now was part of the pilot, which proved to be very successful. So there will be a growing of that effort. And a connecting of that effort in CPD with that crisis intervention team, with the intervention specialists, et cetera, in the Office of Community Health in the community safety and gun violence prevention activity.
Yes, thank you
Is
so
that
much.
answered? Sorry.
Oh, it does.
Okay.
Yes, I just heard that it was going well. That it's
Going well.
it's
Going well.
successful. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Lambert, you mentioned Erlanger having a gun safety and gun storage course. Wanted just to make you aware, if you weren't already, there's a group called Moms Demand Action that has, okay, great. They
Yes,
have
ma'am.
good curriculum.
Yes, we're connected. We've met with them. Yes, ma'am.
Super, thanks.
So Dr. Lambert, going back to a slide that referred to
Now it's
be
working.
trauma informed, and I'm not sure which slide it was on. Yeah, right there.
Oops.
Come forward.
Guiding
principles.
principle.
Be trauma informed and aware. And I know there's programs, I guess, for lack of a better word, that we have used even in our school system with our navigators. But that's something that we've really never implemented even in our own rec centers, to my knowledge, and trained our directors in being trauma informed. Is that something that we can bring to our community centers to help train our staff to recognize, those adverse childhood experiences that, that our
It's
young
one- it's
people
one
are
of-
experiencing or going through?
Yes, sir. It's one of the, it's a prevention mode, so that when we know that an individual has been traumatized, being trauma informed, so that we intervene at that point and not when it exhibits in further violence as the child, as the adolescent, young adult gets older. We are looking at and and I think we're probably going to implement several items from some of the best practices around the country for trauma-informed intervention in the community-based. There's everything from mental health first aid certification for folks who work folks who work at community centers, rec centers in the community, to identify for themselves and for the folks that they work with, that they interact with, where they might some of the signs that they may see, and how they may address those, and as needed, direct them to mental health services, counseling services to address that trauma.
Yeah, so that is something that we're going to bring to our community center staff.
Yes, and there are a
to
number of models
help them.
that
Okay.
that address that, as that address the trauma, so that it
Yeah.
doesn't continue to repeat itself. That's what we're trying to prevent. We just need to prevent that. And there are a number of models we're addressing, and some will be implemented in the community centers in the community, and in the community centers and in other places in the community. It could be churches or other organizations that invite us in.
Yeah, well, and you said we have to be invited, but obviously in our community centers,
Yes, we can do.
we sort of
this.
have a captive audience.
Yes.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lambert, for the presentation. On the slide, if we would go to the slide where it's talking about at-risk families, I think it may be the next one or so that we're working with.
Let's see.
Here. So wraparound services to support parents and
Yes.
families of at-risk youth.
Yes.
And I've probably been saying this since 2017 when I first got elected. So the federal government, as you know, they have a program, the welfare system, that's created to support and provide wraparound services to help parents and families pretty much that are at risk. So outside of what these governmental programs have to offer here, and we see the data that go with that, what will your department add to what they're already doing? Because a lot of the people that we're talking about are on this assistance program. So what would?
There are a number of interventions to add to those services for parents and families of at-risk youth. For example, I think an intervention that is not often that's not often implemented or talked about is parenting. It's not really classes, but it's parenting support. Support to those families in how they manage the children, how they manage their home, supervision, those kinds of things. So support in doing that. I think people do better when they know better. They do better when they have examples of how to do that, how to manage children, discipline children, that kind of thing. So that's a piece of it, as well as some mental health counseling if that's necessary. If there's someone or family that's been traumatized, there probably is a need for some to at least offer some counseling, have it available, make it accessible, available, and affordable by those families. We certainly don't want to overlook those federal resources that are there, but I think locally there are some things that we can put in place and that we are putting in place that will provide additional support and services to those families. Some of it involves the healthcare, the basic healthcare services that individuals and families do not have. So we want to make those connections. One of the reasons we have the registered nurse navigators is because they're helping to make the connections. We've got 4 clinics, nurse clinics, half-day clinics set up at community centers that are in the target area identified by the federal grant. And so they're making the connection so that families who don't quite know what's going on with a child who's exhibiting behaviors, that kind of thing, we can make those connections for whatever kind of healthcare service, and then within that healthcare service, comprehensive mental health care services, assessments. I had a meeting yesterday with a nonprofit who is an audiology nonprofit who can provide counseling, not counseling, but assessment, because some of what goes on sometimes is, the hearing there may be something going on with the level of hearing that's there, and then that leads to misunderstandings, that leads to a lot of problems that could be prevented if we got to the root of what's going on here. Is the child not hearing? Are there problems that we can assess for and intervene in? That's what we're looking for.
Okay. So what I hear you saying pretty much is families that aren't on this particular program because they get everything down, the insurance covered, mental health services, all that stuff. So I would like to know where those families at, particularly in my district, if you come across them, that need to be connected, because most of the people that I deal with, they're receiving some kind of benefits from this program.
And if they're, even when they're receiving benefits, we have to make sure that they're fully utilizing the benefits that are available. And we do find that sometimes where they have that benefit, but they didn't know the extent of the services available under that benefit. So that's part of what we will be doing with the families that we see, the individuals that we see. At this point, it's primarily through community centers. And sometimes we find them, we make those discoveries at community health events that we have, such as the one we had in East Chattanooga this past Saturday, where we saw, we had probably 60 to 80 individuals visit. We gave we gave 21 vaccinations, lots of questions answered about, where can I get primary health care that's close to me, that kind of thing. So we're reaching out in every way that we can to make sure that they have the services, and where they have the services and the benefits, that they know the extent of what's available to them through those services, through those benefits.
Okay, I like that answer better. But I just got to say.
I'm sorry, say again?
I like that answer better.
Okay.
But I will say this, listen, this behavior comes from these kids that's been in timeout. This stuff didn't happen when you had to go pick your own switch. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I say that jokingly. But
Okay.
serious at the same time. But
okay. I think there's so much we need to do to truly wrap around, and I really like the wording, the wraparound services, because we want to do that for families, for young children, so that they, we don't see this cycle continue on and on and on. We want them to be successful and thrive and grow, and to do that, they've got to have the services in place that they need to be able to do that.
that's true, because in our communities, I know timeout don't work for a lot of us that got the same hue as us, and we see that behavior problem sometimes that come faster in front of us in council meetings, but it just don't work, and we need to find a better way to for parents to deal with their kids to where they can take ownership to discipline their kids. A lot of times when we use the word discipline in the Black community, then people thinking, oh, police or severe punishment or this. It could be simple as, I'm gonna take your iPhone away from you, that,
Yeah.
It
And
could
see,
be
that's,
any of
and that's a
those things.
learning curve that we have to help some parents, some guardians around as far as what discipline looks like, what's effective, at what age, at what developmental stage, and what's not going to be effective. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
And then does it also include like, I know people differ from it, but talking about abstaining from sex, because if you're not in a position to take care of kids, then that's a whole nother conversation. I mean, I know some people probably don't support birth control, but maybe that's an option or things that we should be trying to talk about. Because once you procreate with people and bring children into the world, and you placing it on the government lap to tell you how to be a parent, like that's a whole different story. But that's just my personal opinion. I'm sure I'll hear about it on Facebook later. But yeah, that's a concern.
Your questions demonstrate that wraparound services for these at-risk youth and their families entails quite a bit. And, we're going to take one bite of the apple at a time as fast as we can go with it, making sure that it's impactful, that it's helpful, that it's making a difference.
Okay.
We've got to do that, and we owe we owe these children, these families, that we do. And I thought I said somebody else trying to ask.
You good, Councilwoman? Okay. Councilwoman Noel.
Thank you, Dr. Lambert. You mentioned the health fair this weekend, which I did attend. And it was well-staffed, well-informed, well-attended, and there was a large variety of services there. And it was very successful. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. We appreciated you coming by. We also had Chief Murphy there. One of the displays there, exhibits there, was a table for the police community policing activity. So that was really great to have that there for folks, and had lots of materials. What you witnessed were a multitude of our partners that we have signed MOUs with. Through the grant that we have, we reimburse them for their staff time that comes in. The thing that we have to think about is how we can maintain that, because our grant is a 2-year grant. We're going into year 2. So what happens after the second? We are continually looking for grant opportunities, but these are needed services and activities, and we want to be able to continue them beyond that grant. And we want to be able to continue these activities because they are needed.
Right. It was toddlers too. I think the oldest person I spoke to was 89.
Yes.
So it was an array there. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chairman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Lambert, thanks for talking with us today. I was curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on when we talk about support, and that means so much to me. I mean, in my heart, I want to tell you that support is everything. I mean, as a father with a 13-year-old son, I can't tell you how important that word is to me. Can you talk a little bit about when we're identifying or when we're working with someone and we know they're in the Hamilton County school system, how are we tracking them and how are we following them? I think I've heard the term in the social work, soft handoffs or something of that nature. But I'm trying to figure out, are we doing that, or what are we doing? If you could elaborate on that, that would be incredible. Thank you.
We are doing some of that. We actually have some of our current staff who are the staff we currently have who are intervention specialists. They work in multiple schools. I know Howard School is one of them. And we do, they get the referrals often from either a teacher, sometimes a principal, and the process is going to involve individual counseling, some group counseling, some other activities, making available activities in the community that are going to be helpful and provide an outlet for these individuals. But we're actually in the schools. And what I wanted to do, sir, if you don't mind, I knew that we wanted to go over this framework briefly, but I'd also like to introduce those of you who don't know him to Chris Sands, who is the Interim Executive Director for Community Safety and Gun Violence Prevention. And I believe what he'll describe is some of the activity, particularly in the schools, Chris, if you don't mind. as far as how that happens and what service they get and how we track. And then before he comes up, Chief Murphy, I wasn't sure whether you wanted to talk about CIT or, okay.
Thank you. To Chair, Madam Chair, to the council, good afternoon. To answer your question, one of the things that we have done based on our data and our research, we have discovered that if we walk with young people for at least 1 hour a week for 52 weeks, we drastically change the narrative of those particular young people. With that being said, we have already started in the schools, spending time with young people, figuring out not only through referrals who those young people are, but getting references from teachers and things of that nature to start building relationship on the front end. In order to make this particular change, it's going to take credible messengers from everywhere to ensure that we are impacting the young people that are affected the most by these issues.
And Chris, one of the words, if I may, Mr. Chair, one of the words I haven't heard and I hope we hear a lot more of is love.
Yes, sir.
I really believe
Yes, sir.
in
And that's
that.
the support you spoke of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilman Hester, Chief, did you have a follow-up? No. Okay, okay, okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Councilman Hester?
I guess what love got to do with it. I want to, I'm sorry. I want to raise this question. I know it's pretty complex as far as how do we go by enforcing the juvenile curfew? How do we go by doing it? Because I know it's pretty complex.
Yes, sir.
Dealing with for it not to be a glorified babysitting for the police department.
Yes, sir.
How do we really enforce that?
That's a really good question. One thing, and I'm going to continue to say this, we have to build strong relationships, not just with the young people, but with their guardians and with their parents to understand the magnitude of why this is important. We believe that relationship is the new currency, and we will not see any change unless we begin to build relationships with those whole families to ensure not just the curfew, but they understand the magnitude of what's going on here in Chattanooga. So building those strong relationships and with not just the students, but with the parents will begin to make a difference with that.
All right, you good?
Good.
All right. Dr. Lambert, you want to tag back in?
I'll tag back in unless Chief Murphy wants in anything. Chief Murphy? CIT and curfew enforcement. And then I'll finish.
So I missed part of the presentation, which I hate. Dr. Lambert is very passionate about this as well as I love the kids. But yeah, we're actually, especially now that school is back in session, we're looking to partner with some of we're going to start where we can reach right now and start partnering with at least our high schools. But in reference to the CIT, what Dr. Lambert was speaking of is that we're expanding that area where we have our co-response unit. Right now we have one team, so we're looking to hopefully expand to 3 or 4 teams, but also to just have bring on someone who will be the supervisor over the social workers that will be coming and partnering with our police officers, as well as coordinating with Dr. Lambert's team so that they're sort of cross working with each other. So there's constant information flow back and forth between our units to make sure that we're staying not just from the proactive stance, but also making sure we're feeding that information for the preventive side of that as well. So we're hoping that when this expands, we'll have a better reach because they've had an awesome success with just that one team. So if we can make it more expanded around the day, hopefully maybe, the majority of the day, that'll help us out a whole lot. So unless you have any questions for me, that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. We'd also like to suggest we absolutely have to track what we're doing, how much we're doing, the impact of it, whether we're experiencing the desired outcome. So we'd love to come. We'd be happy to come back and put together a lot more detailed information about what we currently have and the new things that we have, and numbers and impact, that kind of thing. Areas by district, we can do that kind of presentation if you wish at some point.
What kind of time frame you talking about to gather that kind of data? And
We
come
have
back?
some of that data, some of that information, so we could probably have that in within a month or so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we'd like for you to see a really more full picture of what's on the ground and working right now. So we'd like to do that.
Okay. We will schedule that accordingly.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else that needs to come before the Public Safety Committee at this time, we will adjourn to attorney-client privilege in the conference room.